Be me. Just a regular guy, late 20s, working a decent job in tech. Not making millions, but comfortable enough to not worry about bills and to have some hobbies. Life is pretty stable, which I guess is the goal. The only thing missing was finding someone to share it with. Had been out of the dating game for a while after the last relationship ended. It wasn't a bad breakup, just one of those things where you realize you want different things out of life. After a few months of focusing on work and the gym, my buddies convinced me to get back on the apps. Said I was going to turn into a hermit if I didn't. Reluctantly, I installed one of the popular ones. Swiping through felt like a chore. A sea of the same profiles, same poses, same generic bios. Just ask, fluent in sarcasm, looking for a partner in crime. It was exhausting. I was about to delete the app for the 5th time that week when I came across her profile. Let's call her Sharon for the sake of the story. The pictures were professional, almost too professional. One on a boat holding a glass of champagne, another in a fancy rooftop bar overlooking the city. A third one was a selfie with a bio that laid it on thick. Something along the lines of strong, independent woman who knows her worth. Claimed to be an entrepreneur, a girl boss, building her own empire. The profile also mentioned she had high standards and wasn't willing to settle. Every part of my brain that had learned from past experiences was screaming, run. But another, smaller part was curious. Maybe I was being too cynical. Maybe she was genuinely successful and just wanted someone on her level. Against my better judgment, I swiped right. Surprisingly, we matched almost instantly. A message popped up a few minutes later. Well, here you are. A bit of an odd opener, but I rolled with it. We started chatting. The first day or so was pretty standard stuff. What do you do? What are your hobbies? What kind of music do you like? She seemed intelligent, and her texts were well written. But there was an undercurrent to the conversation that I couldn't quite place. It felt less like a conversation and more like an interview. She'd ask a question, and before I could even ask one back, she'd pivot to talking about herself. I learned a lot about her brand, her journey, and her vision. It was a lot of buzzwords that didn't seem to mean much. By day 2, the questions started to get more specific. She asked what company I worked for. I told her, it's a well-known name in the industry. Her tone immediately became more interested. Then she asked what I did there, which is a normal question. I told her my job title. Then she asked, so what does a guy in your position usually make? That was the first major red flag. It was so direct, so lacking in subtlety. I tried to play it off, saying something like, enough to be comfortable. She replied with, comfortable is a relative term. My definition of comfortable is probably different from yours. I should have just unmatched her right then and there, but the curiosity was still there. I wanted to see how far this would go. It was like watching a documentary about a rare, exotic animal. The conversation moved on, but the transactional nature of it lingered in the air. She started talking about her last relationship. Apparently, her ex was a perfectly nice guy, but he just wasn't ambitious enough for her. She said he was intimidated by her success and her drive. She talked about how men often feel threatened by a powerful woman. I just listened, thinking that there was probably a whole other side to that story. She said she needed a man who could keep up with her lifestyle. That lifestyle, from what I could gather, involved a lot of expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and designer clothes. It wasn't clear how her entrepreneurial journey was funding all of this, but I didn't ask. Finally, after a few days of this back and forth, she suggested we meet up. I figured, why not? I suggested a cool little gastro pub I knew downtown. Great food, great atmosphere, not too loud, and reasonably priced. A perfect spot for a first date. She saw my message and took a while to reply. When she did, it was a polite but firm rejection of my idea. That sounds cute, but it's not really my vibe, she wrote. I was thinking of something a bit more elevated. She then sent me a link to a restaurant. I clicked on it. It was one of those places you see on Instagram. Ultra-modern decor, a menu with no prices listed online, and a reputation for being insanely expensive. A place where a single steak could cost more than my weekly grocery bill. My thumb hovered over the block button. This was no longer just a red flag. This was a parade of red flags with a marching band. But then a new thought entered my head. This had gone beyond a simple date. This was a social experiment. I had to see this through to its logical conclusion. I wanted to see if this person was real. So I typed back, "Looks great. When are you free?" We set a date for that Friday night. The next couple of days, the conversation continued in the same vein. She sent me pictures of outfits, asking which one I preferred for our date. She talked about how excited she was to finally go out with someone who understood quality. I felt like I was being prepped, groomed for a specific role I was expected to play, the role of the provider, the wallet. Friday arrived. I spent the day working, but my mind was on the evening's experiment. I wasn't nervous like you normally are for a first date. There was no emotional investment. I was just an observer, a scientist about to study a specimen in its natural habitat. I made a mental plan. I decided I would be polite, be a gentleman, but I would also be firm. I set a budget in my head for what I was willing to spend on myself. Anything beyond that was not my responsibility. I got dressed in a nice shirt and slacks, not a suit but respectable. I drove to the restaurant, found parking, and walked in. The place was exactly as I imagined. Dim lighting, soft jazz music, waiters in crisp uniforms who looked like they were judging you. I gave the hostess our reservation name and was led to a small table in a corner. I sat down and told the waiter I'd wait for the other person to arrive before ordering anything. And so I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At the 15-minute mark, I was starting to think she wasn't going to show. Part of me was relieved, but the scientist in me was disappointed. Just as I was about to text her, she swept into the restaurant. She was wearing a dress that was very obviously expensive and heels that looked painful to walk in. She spotted me and glided over to the table. "Sorry I'm late," she said, without sounding sorry at all. "My last meeting ran over. The life of a CEO, you know?" I just smiled and said it was no problem. She sat down and immediately began surveying the room, her eyes darting around, sizing up the other patrons. The waiter appeared almost instantly. Before I could even open my mouth, she looked at him and said, "We'll start with 2 glasses of the Veuve Clicquot." She said it without even looking at me or the menu. The waiter glanced at me, and I gave a slight nod. I wasn't going to make a scene over a glass of champagne. Experiment protocol, I reminded myself. Observe and record. She turned her attention back to me. "So, this place is nice, isn't it?" she said. "I find that the environment really sets the tone for an evening." I agreed that it was a nice place. The champagne arrived. She took a long sip, closing her eyes as if she were tasting the finest nectar in the world. "It's so important to appreciate the finer things," she said, looking at me over the rim of her glass. "So many people just don't get it." The conversation, if you could call it that, began. It was a master class in self-absorption. She talked endlessly about her business, which was still a vague concept I couldn't quite grasp. Something to do with lifestyle branding and social media synergy. She complained about her suppliers, about her clients, about her friends who didn't understand the pressures of being an entrepreneur. She took a picture of her champagne glass, carefully positioning it so the restaurant's logo was visible on the napkin. She spent a few minutes editing the photo and typing out a caption. "Boss babe. Hustle hard. Know your worth." I just sat there, sipping my water, which I had ordered after the champagne arrived. I asked a few questions, trying to steer the conversation into a two-way street. I asked about her family, her hobbies outside of hustling. Her answers were short and dismissive, as if those things were trivial distractions from her grand destiny. She never once asked me a question about myself. Not one. It was like I wasn't even there. I was just a prop in her Instagram story. The waiter returned to take our food order. She looked at the menu for maybe 10 seconds. "I'll have the lobster bisque to start, followed by the Wagyu filet, medium rare," she announced. She then looked at me, a condescending smile on her face. "You should get the Wagyu, too," she said. "You only live once." This was a direct challenge, a test. I smiled politely at the waiter. "I'll just have the Caesar salad and the grilled chicken, please." Her smile faltered for a second. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. It was the look of a machine that had encountered an unexpected input. She quickly recovered her composure. "Oh," she said, with a little laugh. "Watching your figure? That's cute." The waiter wrote down our orders and disappeared. The tension at the table shifted slightly. I had deviated from the script she had written in her head. She put her phone down and decided to engage me directly. "You know," she began, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I've dated a lot of guys, and the biggest problem I find is that they're just not willing to invest." I asked her what she meant by invest. "I mean in the experience," she said, gesturing around the opulent room. "A relationship is a partnership. A woman brings her beauty, her charm. The man's role is to provide the setting, the lifestyle. It's about creating a certain quality of life together. Most men don't understand that. They think a cheap dinner and a movie is enough." She was laying out her entire philosophy, her entire worldview, right there on the table. It was breathtaking in its audacity. She viewed relationships as a transaction where her presence was a commodity to be paid for. The independent woman rhetoric was just a clever marketing strategy. Our appetizers arrived. Her lobster bisque was in a large, ornate bowl. My Caesar salad was, well, a Caesar salad. She ate her bisque with theatrical slowness, making little sounds of pleasure. I ate my salad. It was good. She then started talking about her ex again. "He once suggested we go camping for a weekend," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "Camping? In a tent? With bugs? Can you imagine?" I told her I actually enjoyed camping. She just stared at me, blinking, as if I had just told her I enjoyed eating dirt. "But why?" she asked, genuinely confused. "There are no amenities. There's no room service." "I guess I just like being in nature, away from everything," I said. She shook her head, a pitying look on her face. "That's the kind of scarcity mindset I'm trying to get away from," she said. "Life is about abundance, not scarcity." The main courses arrived. Her Wagyu steak was a small, perfect-looking piece of meat, sitting in the middle of a giant white plate, surrounded by some kind of artistic sauce drizzle. My grilled chicken looked humble in comparison. She took a picture of her steak, then a picture of herself smiling with the steak, then a short video of her cutting into the steak. The meal was an endless performance for an invisible audience. She barely tasted the food before she was documenting it. As we ate, she brought up the topic of toxic masculinity again. She said it was a huge problem in modern society, men being unwilling to show vulnerability, being too competitive, and feeling entitled. I found the last point particularly ironic, but I just nodded along. "It's like men feel they are owed something from women," she explained, while cutting into a piece of steak that I was implicitly expected to pay for. "But a truly enlightened man knows that his role is to be a provider, a rock. He creates a safe space for his woman to flourish." The mental gymnastics were astounding. She had somehow managed to redefine providing as a feminist ideal, and my failure to order the most expensive thing on the menu was a symptom of my toxic masculinity. The meal continued. I remained polite. I listened. I nodded. I was a stone wall, letting her words wash over me. She seemed to be getting slightly frustrated by my lack of reaction. She was used to men who were either fawning over her or arguing with her. My calm neutrality was throwing her off her game. As the waiter cleared our main course plates, she gave me a look that I interpreted as time for the grand finale. She flagged down the waiter as he was walking away. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "I'd like to place an order to go." The waiter stopped, looking surprised. "Of course, madam." "Excellent," she said, beaming. "Can I please get 3 orders of the chocolate lava cake and 2 of the tuna tartare appetizer to go?" The waiter's professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second. He was clearly confused by this large, unusual takeout order from a fine dining table. He looked at me, probably expecting me to say something. I remained perfectly still, my expression neutral. I gave him no help. "Of course, madam," he said, recovering. "I'll have the kitchen prepare that for you right away." He walked away, shaking his head slightly. Sharon turned back to me, a triumphant smile on her face. "My girlfriends are having a movie night in," she said, as if this explained everything. "They were so jealous when I told them where I was tonight. I figured I'd bring them a little treat. They work so hard, they deserve it." She was not only ordering an extravagant meal for herself, but was now ordering food for her friends. On my dime. This was it. This was the peak of the mountain of audacity. I knew then exactly how the evening was going to end. All I had to do was wait for the check. The waiter returned after about 10 minutes. He placed 2 nicely packaged bags on the edge of the table. "Your takeout order, madam," he said. Sharon barely glanced at them. She was busy scrolling through her phone again. The waiter lingered for a moment, then asked the question I had been waiting for. "Will there be anything else, or shall I bring the check?" She looked up from her phone, not at the waiter, but at me. She didn't say a word. She just gave me a small, expectant smile. The universal signal for, "You know what to do." I made eye contact with the waiter. "The check, please," I said, my voice calm and even. He nodded and went to retrieve it. Sharon went back to her phone, completely at ease. In her world, this was the natural conclusion. The man pays. That's the rule. Her performance was over, and now it was time for her reward. The air was thick with her sense of entitlement. A few minutes later, the waiter returned. He placed a small black leather folder in the exact center of the table. "Thank you," he said softly, and then discreetly retreated, leaving us to our final act. Sharon didn't move. She continued tapping away at her screen, perhaps messaging her friends that their lava cakes were secured. She was giving me the stage, allowing me the honor of handling the bill. I let the folder sit there for a solid minute. I wanted to savor the moment. I took a slow sip of my water. Finally, I reached out and picked it up. I opened it. My eyes scanned the itemized list. 2 glasses of Veuve Clicquot, 1 lobster bisque, 1 Caesar salad, 1 Wagyu filet, 1 grilled chicken, 2 tuna tartare, to go, 3 chocolate lava cakes, to go. It was all there, a monument to her ego. At the bottom, in bold print, was the total, 487,50 I had to give her credit. It was an impressive number. I didn't flinch. I didn't sigh. I didn't show any reaction at all. My plan was already set. I reached into my back pocket and took out my wallet. From the billfold, I removed a single $20 bill. I placed the bill neatly inside the leather folder. Then, I did something she didn't expect. I slid the folder gently across the smooth table until it was directly in front of her. Her head snapped up from her phone. Her eyes darted from my face to the folder and back again. Confusion was written all over her face. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice a little sharp. I leaned back in my chair, relaxed. "That's for my iced tea and a tip for the waiter," I said, keeping my voice level. She stared at me, her brain trying to process what was happening. The script was not just deviated from, it was being set on fire. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice rising slightly. "The bill." "Yes, the bill," I replied. "I'm sure you can handle it. You're a strong, independent woman, remember? You're building an empire." I used her own words, her own slogans. The color drained from her face. The confident girl boss persona vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. She opened the folder and saw the single $20 bill sitting next to the $487.50 receipt. "Is this a joke?" she stammered. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious," I said. I started to gather my things. I put my phone in my pocket. I picked up my keys from the table. "You can't do this," she hissed, her voice low and furious. People at the next table were starting to look over. "Why not?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You repeatedly told me about your independence. You told me you don't need a man. You ordered your entire meal, your drinks, and even food for your friends without consulting me once. This was your evening. You created the experience. It only seems fair that you should invest in it." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She was completely checkmated by her own logic. Every argument she could possibly make would contradict the very image she had spent the entire night and probably her entire adult life crafting. I stood up from the table. "It was an educational evening," I said. "Thank you for the lesson. Good luck with the bill." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked through the restaurant, past the curious glances of other diners, past the hostess stand, and out the front door into the cool night air. I felt a sense of calm, of justice. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. It was about the complete lack of respect, the staggering entitlement, the assumption that I was not a person but a function. As I was walking to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "I can't believe you just did that. You are a toxic, misogynistic pig." Another one came in immediately after. "I don't have enough money to pay for this. You have to come back." Then another. "This isn't funny. I'm going to have to call the police." I read the messages under a streetlight. The strong, independent woman had crumbled at the first sign of real-world consequences. Her power was an illusion, funded by the expectations she placed on others. When those expectations weren't met, the illusion shattered. I didn't reply. I got in my car. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, my phone started ringing. Her name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It stopped, and then immediately started ringing again and again. I drove home in silence, the phone buzzing angrily in the center console. When I got back to my apartment, there were 15 missed calls and a wall of text messages. They ranged from furious threats to pathetic pleading. She called me every name in the book. She told me I had taken advantage of her. She said I had ruined her night. In one of the last messages, she wrote, "A real man would have never done that." I read that one and smiled. Maybe she was right. A real man, according to her definition, was one who would happily pay $500 for the privilege of being ignored, condescended to, and used as a prop. A real man was a doormat. I took a screenshot of the conversation, just in case. Then I blocked her number. I blocked her on the dating app. I erased her from my digital life. I never heard from her again. I have no idea how she resolved the situation at the restaurant. Maybe she had to make a humiliating call to her parents. Maybe she had to try and talk her way out of it with the manager. Maybe one of her girlfriends had to come down and bail her out, an awkward exchange for some cold lava cakes. I don't know, and I don't care. The experiment was a success. My hypothesis was confirmed. The lesson cost me about $7 for an iced tea, which I consider the best money I've ever spent on a date. I deleted the dating app the next morning. I figured I'd take a break for a while. Maybe I'll try again in a few months. Or maybe I'll just go camping.